here. Arrowy, Casey, Ender, Lambie Series, Blood Trail, Kuonet.
Going 5-1. And then to round out the top 16, we have Jasain, Blitzchung, Naviut, Kribo, Hunterace, Muzzy, Tom60229, and Faeli.
2 tour stops at all, but it's his first time going into...
Tempo Mage has all but gone, and I really shouldn't call it Tempo Mage. I should call it Aggro Mage, really, more than anything else. And on Faeli's side, he has lost the Druid, which I believe is a Malygos Druid.
Taunt Druid,
Taunt Druid, it is Taunt Druid. Sorry, we saw Faeli on stream yesterday. Of course, Taunt Druid. And that will leave both Shamans, and they should both be Shuttlewalks. I believe no even Shaman left in the top 16, but I may be wrong on that one. Both Hunters are Death Rattle Hunters, I believe, and then there's the Odd Rogue of Arrowy against Faeli's Evenlock.
Yes, I do believe so. And Arrowy was somebody we did not see on stream yesterday. He's kind of our mysterious challenger for this top 16, which is otherwise full of well-known players. But Arrowy did perform the best yesterday. He is the top seed for the top 16, and he's got quite an interesting hybrid lineup, I have to say. Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. A lot of the reasons for bringing Mage was to target Quest Warrior. Quest Rogue. As a result, a lot of people didn't bring Quest Rogue, and you can see most of the top 16 don't actually have it in their lineups.
Yep.
But despite Faeli not having it either, Arrowy's Tempo Mage was still banned out, or Aggro Mage was still banned out. So we will get into game 1 now, where Arrowy has queued up the Odd Rogue into Faeli's Evenlock, and if you're in Arrowy shoes, you have to be feeling pretty good about how this queue order's turned out.
Yeah, queue order, and also being on the coin with Vilespine in hand, which is the key card to try and turn the tides in your favor against Evenlock when you miss like either those 3 drops sticking or the turn to 1 drop with Cold Blood.
Okay, so Faeli here doesn't have too much that's interesting in his opening hand. The Acidic Swamp Ooze is, of course, a very valuable card against that Odd Rogue, but he is still looking for some pressure, some heat, and some removal as well, and that's not to be found yet. Arrowy just plays out the 1-3 Mole, which is a pretty good first turn. I mean, Odd Rogue can kind of have these opening turns where you don't hit the 1-drop and the rest of the game feels weird, but it's not game-breaking if you don't have it either. It's quite interesting to see how the 1-drops play out in that deck.
See here that Faeli has both the oozes in his hand, and that is more and more common to include both of these in an Evenlock list. And it's not only just because there are many decks such as Malygos Druid that have 1 weapon, which is very central and crucial to their game plan, but just being able to consistently remove things that are annoying for the Evenlock, like the dagger from the Rogue, can help it a lot. And we saw Arrowy there actually forego going for the dagger in favor of these 2 1-drops hitting the field before Hellfire comes on, and I don't mind that at all.
It may also be a nod from Arrowy to the fact that there are double ooze in Faeli's deck, and those are the cards he's going to be keeping. He's not running Doomsayers, which is part of the reason why you would then run the second Acidic Swamp Ooze. So Arrowy knows that I can go wider on the board, and it's a little bit safer on these early turns before the Hellfire comes down. And you don't want to develop that dagger too early, given that the ooze is likely to be a keep.
Yeah, and he didn't even have Hedge Clan Plug in hand, so there was no argument against that play. And Faeli now can play out his Twilight Drake here, but he might hesitate expecting something like the coin Vilespine. I do think, however, that he has to take the risk. Having the early Twilight Drake just stick on board is the best way for the Evenlock to actually combat these minions from the Odd Rogue.
Yeah, I think the other thing from Faeli's perspective as well is even if this coin does come down with the Vilespine, which is probably the worst turn for him, the damage that'll be pushed to face unless Arrowy holds off will put Faeli in tap Hooked Reaver range.
Yes.
Which is another really good way to reload that board.
So you notice that Arrowy puts his Vilespine next to the highest health minion, setting up for a Fungal Mancer that is most going to be resilient to Defile. Faeli has the option to Hellfire this turn and remove most of the board, though. It's quite awkward because you leave up that Vilespine.
Yeah, it's interesting because it does give Faeli... It could give him a little bit of a read that the Fungal Mancer's in hand, but I guess Arrowy should always be doing that type of ordering even if it's not in hand because you could draw it, so maybe he can't read too much into it.
So Arrowy can re-dagger and then create a dagger that has 6 attack and then just trade in one of those flame elementals. He did already see 1 ooze, so I feel like that play is quite tempting as well. Using the Fungal Mancer here also looks good because you have a second one, but then that means you have to trade those buff minions, or at least one of them, into the 7/7.
The thing I like about playing the Fungal Mancer now is 2 in hand is very clunky, and if you aren't developing more minions and you're going to be trading like 1 in with the Deadly Poison, there's a chance that on your following turn you only have 1 or less minions on board. So playing 1 now and getting some value out of it kind of reduces the clunkiness in the hand. You can still get those Deadly Poisons down in future turns. So I really like playing out the Fungal Mancer here, and that's exactly what Arrowy's chosen to do.
Yeah, I definitely can respect the play, and it's put him in quite a strong position, and especially since he's seen one of those hooked Reavers come down already. Faeli's defense will have to come in the form of this Mountain Giant, I suppose, with a Sun Fury Protector. Again, the Hellfire is not looking good enough because it leaves up the Vile Spine.
Yeah, I think that really is the only play here for Faeli. I mean, he could consider the Shroombraw with the Sun Fury Protector instead, just if you want to play ultra defensive. The problem is I think it's a losing line more often than not because a 4 health minion often is easy for the rogue to clear with the 2 attack dagger and then either Deadly Poisons or the South Sea Deckhands.
Yes.
So I like the Giant here.
So Arrowy again has the potential to go for that Deadly Poison play or double Deadly Poison, and he can put in the Fungal Mancer on top of it. Problem with that is that it's floating quite a bit of mana. With the draw of Firefly, he can just play that down alongside with the 4 mana play. Maybe you go for some hedge with Henge Clan Thug, but yeah, just the 4 attack dagger doesn't seem good enough here. And Fungal Mancer, the math seems to come out a little awkward no matter where you place it because you don't have the dagger equipped.
Yeah, the Fungal Mancer is really awkward on this turn. I actually think the double Deadly Poison play should be considered more strongly now, just because you can use that with the existing Fungal Mancer on board and then reload with a couple of Fireflies. It does open you up to Hellfire, but your opponent will be on 8. The Hellfire will put them down to 5, and you have a 6 attack weapon equipped. So unless the opponent can heal or retaunt again, you're in a position just to close out the game.
Yeah, you're kind of forcing him to have either heal or retaunt, as you said, or Hellfire plus the Ooze, which is a very specific combination of cards.
And even if he does have Hellfire Ooze to clear the board, your opponent's still on 4, and you have Leroy left, double SA Agent left, double Sassy Deckhand left, so there should be 5 outs on your draw on the following turn from 20 cards, so 25% chance that he would find lethal with this line regardless.
Yeah. Arrowy has put Faeli in a very awkward position with that strong offensive that he had throughout the early turns. Faeli, I'm sure he'd love to get this Ooze down this turn. I'm just not sure if it's accompanied by Hellfire or the Shroom-Brewer. I think it kind of has to be Hellfire.
I think Shroom-Brewer ends up being better because both ways effectively get 4 health back.
True.
Because with the Hellfire you clear the board, but with the Shroom-Brewer you just give it back to yourself. Then you have to establish whether or not the Ooze on an empty board is better than the board that he currently has against 2 minions.
I think calculating the outs for Arrowy, which, as you mentioned, Leroy is a big one there. He also hasn't seen any deck hands. It's more charge-based rather than board buffing-based. He already did see 1 Fungal Mancer played out, so I guess that's why Faeli was okay not clearing the entire board. Other things were scary to him, but we can see that Arrowy has the 2nd Fungal Mancer, which is quite unlucky for Faeli.
It is, but the thing that he would have considered is that Fungal Mancer plus Hero Power puts him down to 1 exactly. He's got just enough life to survive this turn, and then he can reload with either the Lich King or the Bone Mare.
Yeah, and sometimes that 1 health is all you need to survive against the Odd Rogue. Their only non-minion based or weapon based burst is the SI7 agent, and if you remove all those outs of chargers by having a taunt minion in place, it does put him in a good position to at least survive until he can get more healing.
Okay, so the Fungal Mancer comes down, and that makes a lot of sense, but let's see whether or not Arrowy decides to take some value trades, which I believe he has to, otherwise there's just too many ways Faeli can hit him back with lethal, and he's going to leave himself open. Oh no, okay, he does get a second trade.
I was so scared there. I didn't even notice Arrowy's health total had gone so low.
How close is this for Faeli? So the Bone Mare will put another 4, so that would leave Arrowy on 1. So he's calculated the exact amount. Yeah. The interesting thing is if Faeli does buff it and goes face, the Vile Spine and the Mole have to both hit in. He'll have 4 damage left, which would leave Faeli on 2. So we will still be on many of those outs that we've already talked about. And I think he'll also then pick up 2 Cold Blood outs as well.
Yeah, and the Vile Spine as well. Second one.
Yes, so he'll have 8 outs of 19 cards, so it's closing in on very, very high chance of winning from here.
Both these players are very much aware of the damage cut-offs of their opponent and playing perfectly around it. Definitely see why Arrowy's made it so far.
This is much better than Boatmare play, just because it makes it even harder for Arrowy to get through this. And it does remove some of those outs. Vilespine's obviously still good, but some of the smaller charges aren't as good in this situation.
Arrowy is still one off.
He's one off.
And if he uses his face to attack into the Lich King, which if you're cold-blooding the Fungalmancer makes sense, then he's putting himself to 1. And then if he clears the Lich King using Cold Blood on the Fungalmancer and his face, he has to trade into the Shroom Brewer with the Vilespine, which makes Hellfire an out for Faeli because Arrowy didn't get any attack to the face at that point. So I think he might have to Cold Blood this Vilespine, as sad as it seems, and instead trade away his Fungalmancer into the 4-1.
I think he might not even need to trade into the 4-1 if he chose not to. Maybe you're more worried enough about Bone Mare that you have to try. Like, yeah. It's only a 1-off in the deck.
But he does get to redevelop this way.
So the Army of the Dead might actually need to be the play this turn. Just looking at there is another option as well with the Plated Beetle Mossy Horror, which would put you up to 7 and leave. I don't know, you still die.
Because the Hench Clan goes to 5.
Gets buffed. So Army of the Dead does look like it's the only play here, but is there much that Faeli can hit that will actually keep him in the game? So there'd be the double Vulgar Homunculus, and I think that's it in terms of taunts that would actually keep him still in the lineup because the Lich King's already gone. Yeah,
it's very difficult to say. Nothing else keeps him alive on board that I can see. Even if you go for Spellbreaker Hellfire, like it leaves up the Argent Squire, and of course the dagger still there, so he is gonna go for this, and that
he hits both!
Oh my goodness!
And the Plated Beetle comes down. That's a huge swing for Faeli. Alright, what has Arrowy got?
Oh, that's a huge whiff.
That looks like it's just gonna be a game.
Yeah, with the Hellfire and Faeli safe at 4 health, he's able to close this out.
Faeli sits back in his chair, he knows that he's locked up the first game with that line of play. Amazing. Bone Mare should come down and finish this one off.
Wow, I'm pretty speechless. That was a really close game, Jackson. Like, so many times, both players spotted these very intuitive lines that actually made it so that their opponent would be 1 or 2 damage off lethal even with their best play, and really took advantage of it. But in the end there, that Army of the Dead pulling not 1 but 2 Vulgar Homunculus really like he's listening to music though, because he's been nodding his head quite a bit there. But maybe Arrowy, that's just the way he focuses, and he has been playing quite solid so far.
Well, it could be the first sign of nerves for Arrowy as well, the fact that he is starting to nod his head, because it's not something he has been doing previously, and it wasn't how he was kind of before the game either. So maybe that is the first sign of nerves getting to him. The pressure of being 6-0 and then leading out the top 16 can get to players, and it's not uncommon for great pros to be rattled the first couple of times they're on stage.
We do apologize for missing the first 2 turns of play there, but Arrowy seemed to have just equipped Candle Shot and then Hero Powered on the next turn. Faeli did not totem, I do believe, because the Candle Shot was at 3 charges, so even if he hit the Searing Totem, it Yep.
Yep, that makes sense. So Faeli here does have the easy trade if he wants to take it. And then a choice, I guess, between Farsight and Mind Control Tech on one of those he wants to play out. Is there anything you're leaning towards, Gio?
I think the Farsight's fine here. Mind Control Tech is very useful in the matchup just to be able to answer those big Death Rattle minions. And sometimes it gets to the point where... Oh, I guess I was wrong. Sometimes, I was just going to say it sometimes gets to the point for Shudderwalk Shaman against Death Rattle Hunter that the Death Rattle Hunter has these eggs on board that aren't doing anything and clogging up the board, and they get forced to play out other minions. So maybe you could have hit it onto 4 minions, but Faeli would rather just have the board initiative here.
Yeah, I guess the nod for Faeli, probably the reason why I played this line is exactly what we're facing down now. If that egg does come out with the play dead trigger, then you do have a way of mopping that up, and you can still Earthshock the egg on board. Is that ideal for him? No, but it is a safer play, and then you can follow it up with a Farsight this turn if you didn't hit any of the other minions you would have liked. And that is an amazing Farsight. Faeli has the discounted Shudderwalk, and there is so much that can be done with that.
Yes, the cheapened Shudderwalk allows for combos to be done much earlier than they would be fairly done.
Wow, this is really interesting. Faeli just going face with both minions.
I guess knowing that the big punish, if there was to be one, is a cube play, and Faeli has this Hex anyway, so he's very happy to just smork down Arrowy there.
It's almost like he baited it out with that line. Because it seems like going face with both minions there is a mistake more often than not. But Faeli obviously calculated the way you would traditionally punish this is cubing. And he already has the answer in hand, so he's more than happy to make that aggressive line, knowing that the downside is very limited.
Really, they're taking a second to consider whether he would kill off the egg and then Hex, or kill off the taunted minion. And I do think there's like a very small consideration for killing off the egg instead. If you plan to have a volcano in the future, maybe that 1 extra health would matter at some point. Or 2, since Faeli, you might just never clean it up.
I guess the other thing to consider as well is if you leave the taunt up, it means that the minion has to attack into it this turn and can't actually contest something else on board. So while the extra health on the egg is worse for Volcano, this is better against minion play by Arrowy this turn. Oh my.
All face.
He is disrespecting Candle Shot completely, saying, you don't have it, I know you don't have it, you'd have to hit it off the top.
Oh, he already played the first one, so you can see that. Arrowy, thankfully for him, picks up this Zilliax, which allows him to clear off both these Manatides, which I think will be at the top of his priority list. Having the double Manatides played very confidently means that Faeli is capable of dumping cards, I would say, because having 2 Manatides is kind of scary at some point against Shudderwock, but it also works out for him because he already has the 2 key cards in the hand. He hasn't really hit Life Drinkers and Terror Knights, but those at least have several copies in the deck.
Yeah, the problem with double Manatide is exactly what you alluded to. It can really get you to overdraw very quickly if the other opponent decides to leave it. And the other thing is it prevents you from getting great Volcanoes off because that's 6 extra health you have to factor in every time. But given Faeli does have a lot of room in the hand, Arrowy has had to respect the Manatides and clear both of those off.
Faeli can go for a Grumble this turn, which will give him a cheaper Ooze in hand, which doesn't matter too much, but just getting the Grumble down early seems okay. Alternatively, he can go for Volcano, which will clear off the board, and then Grumble the next turn. I quite like this line.
And the other thing with the Volcano is you get Kelesith down this turn, which works out very nicely.
Yeah.
Bouncing it back with Grumble, you get that second Kelesith, and then you can even play the Shudderwock early with no other combo. You get 4 Kelesith buffs in deck, and you may just be able to fight minion for minion with Arrowy.
That seems good. Not necessarily all the way to the just full Keleseth plan, but I definitely like the Volcano Keleseth this turn. I guess the consideration is that you're scared of Katrina coming down next turn, so maybe you want to save that for to save more mana for next turn's removal.
So Katrina is going to come down for Arrowy, and he has a very interesting card in this deck, which I hope to see get pulled out, which is Swamp King Dread. Not something that is common in this list, but something that he's teched in.
Very interesting indeed.
So he also has the double Witchwood Grizzly, which could be pulled out. King Crush as well. I believe this is the list that doesn't run the high mains as a result.
Right. I do wonder if the Swamp King Dread is an anti-Quest Rogue tech. I'm not quite sure which other matchups it would be good against. It really prevents like bouncing things.
Some of the combo decks it works well against, but they're very, very rare, like the niche meme decks.
It is quite niche, and Arrowy with the classic magnetic play. Zilliax Spider Bomb has developed quite a strong board for himself and is kind of forcing Faeli to Volcano now if he didn't last turn.
Yeah, this is one of those boards where Faeli's looking at it and goes, "Ooh, I might have to Volcano here." But you could consider just Lightning Storming and then developing minions behind it, holding onto that Volcano for the turn after.
Yeah, while the Zilliax does present quite a lot of damage onto the board, he does know that the burst from Death Rattle Hunter is limited. King Crush coming down next turn could be very scary, so I'm still in favor of Volcanoing and then just maybe delaying Shudderwock a couple more turns.
The other thing with that Katrina is part of the reason why Arrowy held it, the Play Dead can obviously combo with it.
Yeah.
There's still four beasts in the deck, so there's a good chance that he does pull out those high value Swamp King Dread or King Crush pulls, but then also has a bunch of others that are great. You know, Witchwood Grizzlies, those high-stated minions that are being buffed by Calisith are always welcome.
Faeli went with the play you suggested and is going to get another Calisith as a result. That never hurts, but Arrowy has such a powerful turn coming up this turn, and I don't think that the lone Volcano will be enough to solve all of this, and Faeli will be overloaded for quite a bit going into the next turn, so he can't go Lightning Storm and Volcano.
He didn't use Play Dead. That is interesting.
Yeah.
That is very interesting, and I'm not sure why that is. Because with 7 mana, Faeli can't answer
everything, yeah.
Everything. I mean, even if you trade both minions into the Ziliax and then play Volcano, you still don't have enough to clear the board. But it's likely to kill the Katrina and pull something out, which means you wouldn't be able to use the Play Dead on a following turn anyway.
I'm unsure. I kind of like getting an extra 4/13 or Swamp King Dread.
And the other problem with this play is, like, Faeli now doesn't have to use Volcano. He can just get Taunts in front of it. 10 damage isn't that scary. And that's exactly what he's going to do here. The Healing Rain is going to come out instead of playing Calisith again, but those 2 Serenites are going to soak up the 10 damage.
And it also allows for the Shudderwalk to maybe go infinite. It's only 50-50 and no life drinkers yet, but just having those Shudderwalks onto the board with Calisith. Oh, I don't think it's been buffed yet, but just multiple Calisith procs off of it could be enough to get Faeli the board advantage here. Really strong draw for Arrowy though, in the form of Deathstalker Raxar.
Massive draw. It does let him clear off both of those minions straight away, hit the Play Dead, and what's going to come out? The Swamp King Dread, the 10-10 that'll kill whatever comes down onto the board.
Whoa! So that's technically the combo. I mean, Life Drinker and Shudderwalk, but only one Serenite played. He did have a Zola in the pool though.
He does. I think the bigger problem for Faeli is that he doesn't have any of the Glacial Shards played, which means that your opponent is always going to have 20 damage. By playing the Shudderwalks, you can't actually reduce that. So the Life Drinker plus Shudderwalk puts you out of range for 1. But that's not so great. And I think the other thing is, even if you do that, the Katrina could hit into the Shudderwalk, and 50-50 chance that it pulls out the King Crush for lethal anyway. So the Shudderwalk doesn't seem great, but can Lightning Storm Volcano ever do enough damage here?
So if it hits all 3s, there'll be 17 still onto the board.
So you would have to hit Lightning Totem, then High Roll on the Storm, and then Volcano, everything off.
Sorry, that would be 20 still, even if it hit all 3s, right? But it's Faeli, it seems to be his only play here.
I think he's maybe just hoping that one of the minions dies, or he can hit Taunt after this. And if the Katrina pulls out the Grizzly rather than the Dread... oh, he's got the Dread.
What? That is incredibly
lucky.
And
he got the good draw too. What? Oh my.
How does it kill the Dread there? Am I
if someone can do the math on that, post it on Twitter, because I'm sure the odds of that happening weren't great.
No, definitely not, right? And it killed the Katrina as well.
I think the most likely thing that happens is the Grizzly and the Dread stay alive, and Katrina dies when you've got a 50-50 chance of Grizzly versus...
Well, my mind is blown, but Faeli's still not in the greatest position.
Oh, that's a great draw.
Wow. Life Drinker and Glacial Shard can freeze the Wind Fury. Arrowy can still have some outs for Build-A-Beast lethal here, I do believe, though.
He can.
He just needs 5 more damage.
Looking for a charge. Alright, that's not King Crush drawn. We have
another Life Drinker means he only needs 2 damage.
So Life Drinker plus any charge, basically.
Yeah. Has to be the pick. Those are rushes, though, but I do think you take the rush while it's available to you. Faeli has the chance to Shudderwalk it up.
So really, really cool play by Arrowy there, not playing the Zombeast, just because he's worried about mind control techs.
True. And it's also a bit of surprise factor as well.
Yeah, he knows Faeli has to answer this board. Now, Faeli looks like he's going to reduce the odds that Shudderwalk comes back by having those minions on the board when this starts, but it's not going to matter. because Grumble comes down in the correct order, and this just gives him such a big boost because you have the Glacial Shard, which you can now play again. You've got the Life Drinker, which you can play it again to further get you out of range, and you still have enough mana for another Shadow Walk thanks to that discount on Farsight.
I am still in disbelief. It's gonna get so much healing because of the double Life Drinkers in the pool now, and I just keep thinking back to that Volcano turn. How many times in 100 times does it actually clear 2 minions there?
Yeah, because that was the difference. Not only did it clear 2 minions, but it also missed on the 50-50. Because if King Crush had come out instead of the Witchwood Grizzly, then he still would have had lethal.
Exactly. That's kind of sad for Arrowy, not gonna lie.
Very sad.
And I don't think there's any beast he can build to get him out of this one.
Oh, this is the worst feeling. You feel like you've been ahead all game, you've been playing well, and then Shadow Walk just comes down and does its thing.
I also do think that Arrowy could have pulled the trigger on the playdead a bit earlier, though. He did just play it on the next turn after the Rexar, and missed the Rexar hero power consequently.
Yes, I guess if you were to look at one thing that Arrowy probably should have done differently, that's exactly what I believe should have changed, and that is he had the chance to use the playdead on Katrina and decided not to do it.
Yeah. And who knows if it would have cost him the game, but we do know that Faeli is going to go up 2-0 in what we thought is, well, not necessarily an unfavored lineup once you ban the mage, because it is only like one truly aggressive deck left for Arrowy in that Odd Rogue.
So it did cost Arrowy the game, definitely, right? Because it was that Volcano by Faeli that kept him in there.
Yes.
The reason why we wanted the playdead to come out was because it does create a more resilient board.
Again, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And Casey, our other 6-0 person after Swiss, is of course familiar with that curse himself. He'll be looking to break that today. But we will jump into Game 3 now, where Faeli has queued up the Hunter, and Arrowy has taken the most favoured matchup in the Odd Rogue to hope to at least get one win on the board as he looks to reverse sweep Faeli.
Yeah. And Arrowy actually did full keep his hand, which had 3 1-drops. I do love the keep of the Vilespine Slayer, but I wonder about this deck hand as well. I feel like it would be good for Arrowy to try and look for that Hench Clan Thug, Vicious, Fledgling type turn 3 play, or at least a Cold Blood to go with these 1-drops.
Yeah, I really do agree with Hunter these days running Mind Control techs and Ziliax as well. They have much better answers to deal with wider boards than what they previously did. Oh, this is a tough choice for Faeli.
I think we take the Kalaseth. I don't think there's much time to actually develop Rexar minions.
And that's exactly what happens. It feels so bad to let Rexar go when it's that 2 AoE, 5 health. But Faeli's valuing tempo very heavily in those stats, and Kalaseth will come down here to at least contest the board.
Quite unfortunate for Faeli that he drew the Chain Gang in the deck before the Kalaseth had its activation. That's one of the ways you can completely lock out the Odd Rogue, and I think that's the reasoning of Faeli taking the Kalaseth there, is to just have these buffed taunt minions. Like, the Ziliax with a buff is so hard for Quest Rogue to deal with, or even if it doesn't, even if they do deal with it at that point, it might have healed 8 life for Faeli at that point.
So Faeli here, considering whether to play the Spider Bomb or the Terrascale Stalker, and plays out the Stalker confidently, both would likely result in that weapon being soaked up as well as the minion. So why do you think the Stalker was played here over the Spider Bomb?
I do think that at least with the Spider Bomb, you have a chance of using its Death Rattle activation later on. Something like a playdead off the top might be an emergency response to some big minion. Of course, Faeli still expects Vicious Fledgling to maybe coming out this turn, or Hench Clan Thug.
I think the other thing as well, if you're in Faeli's shoes, is you play the Spider Bomb, Arrowy can actually ignore it. He doesn't have to kill it, and Arrowy has the chance to just develop a bunch of low-cost minions that don't really matter either. So maybe the Spider Bomb does allow for a little bit more counterplay by Arrowy, where if something like Playdead does come off the top, he can really force answers.
So Arrowy is kind of lacking for a very enticing play for this turn. It is just going to be him going wide onto the board here and ignoring this Terrascale Stalker. This is not a board that particularly wants, that Faeli would want to mind control tech particularly, so I think Arrowy's fine just going wide like this.
I mean, I think if you're in Faeli's shoes, if you had the mind control tech, you'd still consider playing it here, but with that Stalker on the board and the Saronite Chain Gang in hand, this looks like a really good turn. He contests the board well, he gets rid of one of those minions, and this is the downside of what Arrowy's keep was. Yes, he's got a lot of early game pressure on the board, but it's not really the minions that Odd Rogue needs to close out a game.
Yeah, he definitely needs those scaling threats, or if not, to try and look for something like Fungalmancer, which he still has the chance of getting off the top, and it would be very strong against what is likely going to be a chain gang this turn. But Faeli's kind of hesitating because I do think he is scared of particularly coin Fungalmancer.
Yeah, he's looking at the way that Arrowy full kept and what's been played so far, and he must be thinking there's a decent chance that Fungalmancer is in that hand. There isn't, but this is a great pickup for Arrowy here.
Yeah, he can clear most of these minions. Unfortunately, 1 damage short of clearing that Terrascale Stalker.
And this is going to set up some really nice counterplay for Faeli here. The Spider Bomb with that Play Dead can be used to guarantee the kill on Hench Clan Thug after the Stalker hits into the Firefly.
And he will have complete control of the board and still a living Spider Bomb that is going to demand a dagger, but he's actually just going to go for a cube onto this and played at it afterward. And I actually really like this as well at such a healthy life total. Of course, there's no saps in Odd Rogue. The biggest punish would be a Vile Spine, in which case you still get those Death Rattle minions.
Yeah, that's really, really neat. Because the Fungalmancer wasn't played in the turn before, Faeli could probably get a read that Vilespine Slayer was the keep of the big cost card given he was on coin. So playing the cube onto board doesn't get punished by Slayer given the Death Rattles exactly as you talked about. It's a really neat play. The problem with this line, of course, is it has been slightly punished by the Fungalmancer because it buffs that Hench Clan Thug out of range for Carnivorous Cube to trade into.
Yeah, it did come off the top though. And Faeli, if he really feels threatened, has the opportunity to Hunter's Mark down that Hench Clan Thug. And that's the only guaranteed way to clear it because trading off the 3-4 and Spider Bomb Play Dead is only a 50-50 in this case. If you take even one more hit from the Hench Clan Thug, suddenly all this burst in the Odd Rogue deck is super scary. Leroy, Cold Bloods, you haven't seen them yet. You've only seen one deckhand. You haven't seen any Deadly Poisons. Wonder how much Faeli has to respect this, and he is going to go for the Hunter's Mark onto the Hench Clan Thug, and I really like this from him.
Yeah, I think this is a great line. You get to that point where you have a bigger board than Odd Rogue, and the only way they can then win is by getting that burst to face, which is Leroy, a Cold Blood here or there. And at 21 life, if Faeli can preserve that while making his board go wider, he doesn't matter or doesn't care to him that he is being inefficient with the way he's using some of those resources and the way he's getting those trades. So was that ideal? Absolutely not. But you look at the board, he's really far ahead. He's going to continue to be ahead with that cube. And Arrowy now only has 5 damage on the board, which can put Faeli to 16, but 16 is still a difficult enough number for Odd Rogue to get to, that Faeli must be feeling pretty confident about his odds to win from here.
Yeah, Arrowy, I don't think he has much choice of trading the board here. I do think he has to try and race somehow if he can pick up consecutive Cold Bloods that might be able to get him the win here. But if he's trading this off, I don't think that he can ever... I just think it's delaying the win for the Hunter and not really setting up his own win condition.
I think you're absolutely spot on there, JR. It has to be something like double Cold Blood on the next 2 turns, or something even like a Myra's Unstable Element pickup the following turn and then draw through the deck to get to those Cold Bloods. Without 2 of those, it's going to be really difficult for him to get there, especially considering he's using the dagger to trade into the board rather than to chip away at Faeli's life total even more.
Yeah, it does make the trades look kind of awkward for Faeli, but keep in mind there are still 2 Stalkers in this cube, so the board refill is going to come very easily for Faeli, and he picks up Katrina for next turn with this tracking.
And that will be the play, given that he can trade down on the board and then already fill out the rest of his curve with Mind Control Tech and Spider Bomb. He'll have 4 minions on the board, and it comes back to what we're talking about. Once you have board control over the rogue, and if you're on high enough life total, you feel really good about the game. Sitting on 19 at the moment because Arrowy didn't push everything face and trade it into the board.
The worst thing for Odd Rogue is trying to come back against a wide board. Against a tall board, they have Vile Spines, but against wide boards, they just don't have any game. You don't run Fan of Knives. You don't run Mind Control Tech, although maybe that's the next level tech for Odd Rogue in the next meta, but I doubt it. And Arrowy with a very miserable Tempo Vilespine here. Has picked up Leroy Coldblood though, and it's gonna be shut down by what's likely to be... No, even if it's not a taunt, it's a Swamp King Dread, which eats Leroy.
Faeli doesn't run Swamp King
Oh
Dread,
right,
so
that's my bad. Oh right.
Yeah.
My bad.
The Witchwood Grizzly should just be enough to close this one out for Faeli here. With that Vilespine coming down in a very sad way onto the empty board. That is just not what Arrowy is going to be looking for, and that's going to be a 3-0 Faeli to open up day 2 of HCT Singapore, taking the win over Arrowy. It's a tough day if you're Arrowy.
Yeah, it is the Swiss curse, but I guess in that vein he can